coming up on Piano Teaching Success TV.
The students had no interest in Debussy, Ravel and Nielsen, and in fact were only interested in heavy metal, heavy rock.
Hi, I'm Gillian Erskine, and welcome to episode 6 of Piano Teaching Success TV.
And I'm Paul Meyer. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about our new practice buddy, which we've been working really hard on. And I've got an interview with Christopher Norton. And then, of course, staying healthy as a piano teacher.
So let's kick off with Practice Buddy and show everybody what we've been up to. We've just moved over to a new platform and it's awesome, isn't it, Paul?
It certainly is. And I know a lot of people jumped in and tried out the C major Practice Buddy scale that we had put up, I think, a couple of episodes ago. And we've had some lovely feedback. And so I thought that anyone who hasn't, they can always log on and to to pianoteachingsuccess.com to try it out. But we've also got a little bit of video footage that I made on how to use this with your student.
We're all about having fun, aren't we, Paul?
We certainly are.
And you've been doing a lot of workshops around the place with teachers and sharing some of these little tips about how to kind of ramp up the fun and get up the piano stool and make it really, really interesting. And so we thought we might share those with you today.
Exactly. So the workshops that I've been running are called Teaching Kids of the 2020s, because as we all know, children are so different, even from 10 years ago. So children are so screen driven and busy. Oh my goodness, they're so busy. And they need to be really active to be engaged in a piano lesson. So I was wanting to teach my students how to play C major scales and using our Practice Buddy C major scale, where the children play the scale 4 times. And if you watch this little video, you can see what I'm doing. I'm doing an ascending scale and then a descending scale, and but in between each scale, I have to stand up and run around the piano, which is run around the piano seat to get to the next activity. And it's amazing for the brain because it really makes the brain stimulated. And
well, I think it does a number of things, doesn't it? Because it's also about piano keyboard geography. It's like the children have got to get back down, sit down, focused, and they've got to get their hand in exactly in the right octave. Because so many children go to the piano and go, which octave am I playing in? And then they play in the wrong spot. So it's really training that little thing as well as it's just a little bit of fun.
It is a lot of fun. Let me just show you this activity.
Well, there's so much fun there. And I think there's a couple of ideas depending on what kind of setup you have at home. If you only got one instrument, you can just run around the piano stool. And if you've got more than one instrument, the children can go from one to another. I love that stuff.
It makes such a difference. The one thing I would say, though, I don't know whether you noticed, but I was moving in the direction that I was playing. So if I played an ascending scale, I would move to the right. And if I was playing a descending scale, I would move to the left. Because if you go the same way, you get dizzy.
I think that the kids would probably naturally do that anyway. It's kind of almost a natural thing to do. It'd be interesting to see what they actually do.
Yes, but it's great for understanding of pitch going up, pitch going down. The extension of that activity would be also to say to them, to tell them as they're running around the stool, which direction to play. So they have to think as well. So you could add more to this activity.
Yes. Yeah, you always change up all of so many of these things, and they love that sort of little micro challenge of, oh, something's a little bit different. And they're just so much promotes focus. You know, we do that kind of thing. And one of the challenges, I think, with scales is focus. That they go, this is the same old boring thing. I've always done it, blah, blah, blah. And they're not really thinking about it. They just got it on remote control. And so when you do things like this, it really, I got to think, oh, God, which one am I doing? Which way am I going on? And that actually really makes them hone in. Such an important thing.
Exactly.
So, well, we've got to stay tuned because we've got our little healthy piano teacher checklist coming up. But first, we're going to look at the interview that Paul did with Christopher Norton. Now, this was an interview that you did not that long ago, a few little ago, but at that time, we were going to go to MTNA. But now we're not.
We're not, due to the status of the coronavirus. Here is my interview with Christopher Norton. So tell me about the first microjazz. Was that the first piece, the first book that you did?
No, I mean, I wrote lots of pieces in New Zealand which were kind of like microjazz. In other words, I was trying to combine the sound of popular music with the notation of classical music, which is really what microjazz is.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came to the UK on a scholarship in 1977, and quite quickly was sort of talent spotted by a very famous music educator of the time called John Painter,
Mm-hmm.
who was one of the lecturers at York University, and he introduced me to his publisher, and they were called Universal Edition, which they're still going, obviously. They produce, I mean, their big name is the Carmina Burana guy.
Carl Orff.
But also Stockhausen, Schoenberg, and so on. They have sort of an eclectic range of stuff still. But Universal Edition, I got to know their education manager, and he asked me to do the very first publication I had in the UK, which was a book of piano duet arrangements of Christmas carols. Just
Wow.
straight ahead arrangement. They're still available. But shortly after that, he said, I've got an interesting idea. Would you like to try and write us some improvisations on Christmas carols? And it became a book called Carol Jazz, which you may have come across.
I haven't, but
which
I
is
will
still
look out for that one.
It's a very popular book. It's probably about grades 6 to 8. They're quite difficult, but they're still really quirky and totally characteristic of what I do. I was asked by their education guy to do something very interesting. He said, I'd like you to write me a set of graded pieces in popular styles, not Christmas, but just pieces. And I wrote about 40 pieces in a bunch, and it became Microjazz 1 and 2. But he left the company at that point and emigrated to Canada. And so I had these pieces sitting in my bottom drawer for probably 2 years, what became Microjazz. And I happened to strike somebody at Boozy and Hawkes who totally got them and thought, and in fact, he invented the name because they were also the publishers of Microcosmos. So they were trying to sort of draw a parallel between the Bartok easy pieces and these popular pieces. So that's where the name came from. But they were taken up by the Associated Board within 2 years, 2 of the pieces, grade 3 and 4, and they suddenly went like wildfire. And in fact, they've sold ever since. And then were taken up by the AMEB big time. And so I just struck it lucky at every turn, because it is partly luck, isn't it, as well as goodness.
It certainly is.
I just happened to meet the right people at the right time, because if you meet the wrong people, like record companies are full of this, where bands don't strike a deal, the Beatles being a famous one, and then somebody else signs them up and they become popular. So you've got to hit the right person in the A&R department.
Exactly.
You were going to say?
I was going to say, I know you've got, you've had backing tracks. I remember back when I first met you, and you just put out your first sort of backing tracks. I'm not sure whether they're from Microjazz or which particular series, but you brought them out on, I think, on MT disc for the Roland sound.
It was Roland, yes. Roland
card.
happened to be doing a lot of MIDI files at the time, and I teamed up with a very good MIDI programmer who I still work with, and we ended up doing track. I mean, the pieces suited accompaniment tracks very well because Microjazz is quite linear. In other words, it's not like it's full of big chords, and so there's plenty of space for bass and drums and guitars parts to fit, if you like. So, and a lot of rootless voicings as well, which I just like the sound of them, not realizing that was a kind of characteristic thing of a lot of jazz and pop players to do. And so when you put bass and drums with them, they just sounded like hand in glove.
They do. And did you ever think about the benefits for the student, or did you think, oh, that just sounds good?
No, I realized quite quickly the benefits for the student. Partly that you're, for the time playing aspect, obviously, but one of the big things I think is also, I discovered when I played with live players that you makes you play different, it makes you think of things you didn't know you knew. And I think if you've got good MIDI tracks, they are played by live players. And effectively, my tracks were played by this particular guy, did a lot of work with me, and he tended to play the drums in one take without quantizing. You know, I mean, in other words, they felt like somebody really playing. It wasn't just copying up 4 bars and then 4 bars and so on. So I think they had a sort of organic feel to them, if you like. So when you play with them, you got that experience somewhat of what it's like to play with a good bass player and a good drummer and a good guitarist. And so students loved that. And of course, you could also slow them down so that you didn't have to play them at the sometimes rather brisk tempos I wrote them at.
Yes.
And you could also practice left hand with the right hand, playing from sequence and so on. So it just meant there are lots of fun things. But what my main point is, I think that when you play with tracks, you're learning all sorts of things about styles,
Yes.
which are very rich in content. It's not really just about timekeeping. Otherwise, you might as well do it with a metronome. It's the idea of hearing these other sounds while you're playing, if you like, and hearing these other parts.
I love the experience of getting the genre and style of a piece from a backing track. And that I think gives children a real opportunity to have some understanding, but also maybe harmonic understanding as well, because they might be playing 1 or 2 lines, but they don't understand, or they don't hear that it might be, an A7 chord, but they're only playing an A and an E, but there's a beautiful 7th in there as well to add color and flavor. So lots of
exactly. One thing which I still do, actually, because I do a lot of work with children still on chord playing and improvisation, was I take a piece and just do chords with it, play chords with the backing track, and they love doing that. And of course, you can teach inverted chords quite quickly because they're easy to play, but because they're a mysterious thing to try and explain. If you've got a chord G, C sharp, E, and you say that's an A7 chord 3rd inversion, it's too much information. But they can play it, and then you say, we're going to go from that. And then you say to them, no, we're going to change from that to F sharp, D, C, D. So it's right next to it. So it's an easy transition. But if you've got a chord with A7, D7, and then you've got a backing track in a particular style, it's a really nice thing to do. And of course, when you then try and do simple right-hand improvisation with that chord shape playing, you're starting to sound like the real thing almost immediately. And then you can play them something of the real thing, like some wonderful jazz player who's using those particular types of voicings, but using nice rhythms of the left hand. You say, well, this is kind of what we're doing already. You can hear how nice it sounds when you practice it a bit and get it fluent, if you like.
Yes, I think the opportunity to hear often with pianists, piano teachers, when we teach chords, many people are teaching sort of
Exactly.
And whereas when you're hearing it with that sort of or correct 16th century harmony, but well-voiced harmony, makes such a difference for the oral understanding.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I think that's one of the big things I discovered. Is microjazz is full of, and so is Connections, so is American Pop. All the stuff I do is full of chord shapes, which are inversions, which are easier to play, but close together. The voice leading's nice. but you're then playing nice tunes above them, because I'm a tune writer, if you like.
Mm.
Then you add the bass and drums to it, and you've got a whole nice experience over and over, if you like, in a whole range of styles.
Well, Christopher's certainly been doing this for a long time, and his pieces are just globally popular. I know that our kids, we've taught his pieces to just absolutely love them. They're very, very popular and they're very catchy.
They certainly are. And some of his older pieces for older students, more advanced students, like rock preludes and Latin preludes, which I think came out quite a few years ago, are still really very, very popular with students as well.
Yeah, and they're no wonder. I mean, no wonder they're featured on globally,
Just about
almost
every exam syllabus.
Yeah. And because they've got that combination of being catchy, but also pedagogically very sound.
Exactly.
And I think that's really, really great. And I really quite liked, Christopher is a big fan of backing tracks. And we first were introduced to Christopher's work a long time ago. And when they were on MIDI files and they were really great sounding backing tracks way back in the 90s, and they're still as great now. And I think, the kind of points that he makes about playing with backing tracks, about being exposed to various different styles. And it feels like playing along with a live player. That experience is so hard to replicate for a pianist. Because usually we're locked in the room on our own, practicing on our own, going to a music lesson on our own, doing everything on our own. And generally, but historically, piano players are terrible at playing with other people because they just never learn the skill of listening to something happening and working out how to interact with that. We just never learn it.
That's right. And the other thing is that you get to experience so much more harmony, the extension of, if you've just got two notes, there may be an implied harmony, but once you start adding a whole band, you get a bass line and then some more harmony in the guitars or in the string lines, what have you. You get to really experience music to the full potential, I think.
So if you've never been exposed to these sounds and this sound canvas of what these various different styles have in them, like the various, even down to drum tracks and what have you, but certainly along the point of view of the harmony, if we don't hear them first, then when we're trying to sort of create and everything, we've got nothing to work with. We've got no points of reference.
The other point I would make is the musical multitasking that goes on in the brain when you're playing along with the backing track. So they have to listen to an introduction. They have to
come in at the right time.
Exactly, and they have to stay in time.
Yes.
And the wonderful things about backing tracks these days is you can speed them up and slow them down. It's just so easy, especially with the Practice Buddy ones that we have. You can do it in 1% intervals. It's just amazing if you wanted to.
Yeah, and I really think it's fabulous. We did a little video recently of one of your students, and she just naturally took control of her learning. She knew I think she had to do it hands together, and she thought, oh, I'm not very good at this. Can I do it at 70%? And she went, I want to do 70%. And she just naturally sort of went, oh yeah, I know I'm not good enough at that yet. I want to do that. And then the kids have always gone, oh, can we do it at this percent? Can we do it faster? Can we do it faster? When they're feeling confident, they'll ask to do it faster. I think that's really important when we're looking at kids taking responsibility and owning their learning.
Yes.
And it's a measurable success, isn't it? Backing tracks and speeds, it's measurable success. So because so much music is like esoteric. Where am I sitting in this? So yeah, it's really fabulous. And I think looking forward to his new book, Connections Preparatory, that's coming out, because Christopher actually composes for the full gamut, doesn't he? From very little beginners with this new book that's coming out, right the way through to rock preludes and what have you, which are used in advanced syllabuses. And he's just as good at all of those levels. So let's move on to the healthy checklist, because this is topical at the moment. Well, we have to be very mindful of staying healthy all the way through, because if we actually get sick, it means we don't earn money, because we can't teach students and all the rest of it, and we don't like students coming to our lessons sick, and we certainly don't want one student passing on a virus to another student or what have you. So this is topical really all year round, but particularly at times like this.
Yes, so you can download, Gillian's holding up the Piano Teacher's Survival Kit that we've created. It's called the Healthy Piano Studio Checklist. 5 things to cover in the checklist. And the first one, of course, is hand washing protocol. And so important, as we now know with the latest virus, the coronavirus or COVID-19, it's so important to make sure that you're washing your hands. And the standard hand washing needs to last for 20 seconds. So a lot of people are saying, oh, you could sing happy birthday twice. Or I love the idea of doing, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star or something like that, but doing it something like in numbers, like 1155, 665, or doing it in solfege. But what a great idea to, change it up and make it different.
Yeah. Well, I think, and it's so important that perhaps, particularly at times like this or in winter, when we're looking at the flu, which, let's face it, the flu can be absolutely rampant in winter times. Before the lessons, your students wash their hands, because before they come in and sit at the piano, because you don't want any transfer effect from one child to another child.
One of the big things about that is using old-fashioned soap. And so, I mean, some of those traditional things are really important. And of course, if you are using hand sanitizer, make sure that it's over 70% alcohol, because if it's not going to kill all the bugs.
And the other thing is, if you are using a towel, make sure it's changed, changed regularly, daily, or even have a series of washers, like a pile of washers, one use, and particularly at times like this when it's pretty bad, straight into a dirty wash basket or whatever to be recycled, because very often it's what you wipe your hands on also that can transfer. Particularly if you have 20 seconds, it doesn't seem very long, but it is a long time to be washing hands.
We've talked about setting airborne germs free, which is opening up the windows. Of course, in some countries,
if it's snowing,
it might be a bit cold to do that.
It could be, because we live in Australia, we don't even think about snow. But yes, it can be a bit problematic from that perspective. So therefore, some kind of antiseptic spray
is always good. Some of the brands that I've heard of are Dettol, Glen 20. So whatever is appropriate in your area, and maybe a little spray before you start the afternoon is always or before you start teaching is a great idea.
And like, we don't really want to see students if they're sick, but you know what? Sometimes kids don't even know, or the parents don't know the kids were sick before they sent them to school. And for whatever reason, sometimes we actually have got students that aren't 100%. I like this one. I always have this one. Little box of tissues handy. They're always handy for no matter what.
And tissues are really important to make sure that you bin it straight away. One of the protocols that they're encouraging at the moment is putting it in a plastic bag and sealing it. That's a little bit wasteful in terms of the environment.
Plastic bags.
And the environment, but at the moment in the current climate, it might be a good idea.
And also, where is that bin kept? You really don't want that bin kept right beside your piano where you're breathing up all these fumes, right? You probably want to keep it outside of your studio or what have you. Just think about that placement in a way that is that anything that goes in that bin is not going to be having little airborne particles running around.
And then, of course, wiping the keyboard after students, whether they're sick or not, is a great idea. Just remember, don't ever spray anything directly onto your piano. Put a spray on a microfiber rag and then wipe your pianos down. The other thing I would say is I would do that with a glove on as well.
I think the other thing with this is keep on rinsing that rag out, because otherwise you could be just spreading the germs all over. There's just so many things to think about, isn't it?
And then, of course, you need to build your own cleaning routine into your studio. And I would actually even articulate this to my own students, and because so that they know that you have actually thought about this. So that it shows that you're a really good piano teacher and you're really aware of occupational health and safety for everybody in your studio. I would encourage you to log on to pianoteachingsuccess.com/episode 6, where you can download a healthy piano checklist, which is part of your piano teacher's survival kit.
So one of the things that you can do during this time is actually in universities and colleges and all sorts of places are actually starting to think they're going to actually go virtual. And so we can do that too. We can do that with Skype, or if you've got a Zoom membership or even Zoom, you might be able to do it with Zoom, which are both ways in which we can connect with our students over the internet. And so, Paul, you've done this, haven't you?
I have. I did it with a more advanced student. I think it would be incredibly challenging to only teach via Skype for younger children, because I think that there is certainly something about having a human connection. One of the challenges I found was being able to see the whole student when we're teaching in a one-on-one lesson, and we're physically there. We can look, we can see the student, how they're sitting, we can see their hands, we can see what they're thinking and what they're feeling, and interpret all of those things at a glance of an eye. It's very much more difficult when you are using Skype, but you can do it. And I've got a little picture here of a setup of a piano and a computer, and you can notice that the computer screen is quite big, and so it allows you to see the student effectively. I know that my students have all had Macs, and I've had Macs, and Mac to Mac just works brilliantly over Skype. You just don't seem to get as good quality with a PC. But you've got to make sure that the student's computer is set far enough back that you can actually see their body and their fingers. What I did with Baz when I was teaching him is he was living in Hong Kong, and they had such good internet we could actually have two cameras running simultaneously. So I was able to get two feeds, one from above and one from the side. So it made it so much easier to help him.
And this is also predicated on a parent's ability to kind of, or willingness to spend the time in trying to set this stuff up so that it'll actually work okay. This is just sort of a short-term measure, something that could probably tide everyone over for a couple of weeks, because there's plenty of people out there teaching on Skype.
And very successfully. I know Baz and I had lessons for 2 years using Skype, and it was very successful. The one thing I would say, and you'll notice that we're both using headsets, the advantage of using the headset gives the microphone an easier way to pick up information. It doesn't have to fight with a speaker. So that will actually make the sound that you hear better. And teaching by Skype is a really good thing for your own oral development as a teacher, because you've really got to listen.
We've been having this discussion in our business partners group for all of our Forte school owners, and one of the school owners said, "Yeah, you got to have a really good ear for the Skype lessons." He said that just today, I think. So because we've been discussing that, what we're going to do here in Australia regarding that with our schools. So the other thing, any other points, Paul, regarding teaching by Skype?
Having a good internet connection. If you have an Ethernet connection that you can plug into directly, that will make a difference. I know at home, when I'm at home, I have Ethernet directly into my computer. I've done speed tests with Ethernet and with an Ethernet cable and using Wi-Fi, and it is a third faster usually by with an Ethernet cable. So that will make a difference, but that's not always available.
You're a teacher that likes to accompany your students. I know it's a lag. Even if it seems like there isn't a lag, there's a lag.
You could also record something for your student to play along with, and just send them an audio file or a video file of you playing it. So that's another option as well.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and in the current climate, we kind of hope everything kind of works out really, really well, and we look forward to seeing you in next episode of Piano Teaching Success TV. Bye.
Bye.